Already?
Ready? Okay. All right, cool. So we're going to be discussing appraisals today. Oh, by the way, back at the neighborhood loans, I like to call it a campus just because of how big the office is.
Absolutely,
It's not
yeah.
really a campus, but yeah, an entire floor dedicated to the office is pretty sweet.
Yes.
So we're going to be discussing appraisals today. First question I have is like, kind of by definition, what is an appraisal? I like to call it fact-based opinion.
Yep.
What would you call
That's
it?
great. Yeah, so appraisal is definitely a fact-based opinion. Appraisers are going to determine the accurate value of that property within that time frame of when you're buying. So the rule of thumb with an appraiser is to find comparables in bedroom count, square footage, school district, and square footage size, other properties that have sold within a mile within the last 6 months. So that is going to dictate the value of that home. Some months there's going to be higher sales. Foreclosures can happen, which can decrease that value for a short period of time. So all of that is going to dictate what that appraised value is. But that is the rule of thumb. It's going to be within a mile, and then a sale within the last 6 months is what they're typically looking for.
Gotcha. And so, where in the buy? So let's say I'm Mr. and Miss Buyer. We put an offer in. We're in the contract. When in that process, I guess, does the appraisal occur?
Sure. So within every purchase contract, there usually is a time frame of when the appraisal does need to be ordered. It's usually within 10 days. A lot of the times it is once we exit attorney review. So once we're out of attorney review and there are no requests for repairs or seller credits, that's when we'll go ahead and order appraisal. So it usually happens within the first 5 to 6 days of being under contract. We'll then go ahead and order appraisal.
Gotcha. And then as a buyer, why do I need? If I'm a buyer, why do I need an appraisal?
Sure. As a buyer, a lot of people get the two confused with the home inspection, which is to make sure that the property is structurally sound. Outlets are working, AC units working, no foundation cracks, so on and so forth. So a lot of times consumers do that process within the first 24 to 48 hours. And then once the loan process starts and we go to order appraisal, they're like, well, we just did the inspection. And that is to make sure that the house is in good working condition and to point out any details of that home that need to be repaired or updated. The appraisal is to make sure that the home is actually worth what you're buying it for. Okay, so their home inspection is one point of view, and then the appraisal is the other. The appraisal is actually required by law for any lender to actually close on a mortgage. Home inspection, highly recommended, but not required.
Right, and I know sometimes, depending on the buyer, depending on the situation, sometimes they'll waive
Yes.
they'll waive the inspection contingency. I
Yep.
see that more so with like investor buyers who are going to go in and renovate the property anyway. It's like, why pay money for an
Correct.
inspection when you're just going to go in and kind of tear everything down? But yeah, retail buyers, I always suggest do not waive your inspection contingency, even if it's recently been renovated.
Yep.
You never know. Just because they put all the bells and whistles and it looks nice
Yep.
doesn't necessarily mean that it is done properly.
Absolutely. It's like putting lipstick on a pig.
Lipstick on a pig, right? And so, as a seller, how should I feel about an appraisal? What do I want an appraisal if I'm the seller in the home buying situation? Do I want an appraisal?
Yeah. As a seller, I would want to know what my property's worth, to do things the right way. That's what keeps our market accountable is appraisals. So, unfortunately, a lot of sellers, they have the emotional attachment to their property and their sweat and hard work to either remodel it or upkeep it for however long they've been living there. And if they're remodeling it, they think that they put the best, type of product in there, so they have that emotional attachment. But appraisal is there to protect everyone. It's there to protect the seller, to make sure that that property is worth what they're selling it for. And sometimes they may think it is valued less than what it actually is, so that can protect them as well. And it's there to protect the buyer and also the lender. So appraisal is a very necessary report that needs to be completed when purchasing a property or selling a property.
Gotcha. And I want to kind of circle back to something you mentioned. So, right, when doing an appraisal, appraiser is going to compare, same number of bedrooms, square footage, things like that. But it's also the same type of structure, meaning we're not comparing a 4-bedroom duplex to a 4-bedroom single-family home, correct?
Correct. That is correct. So it has to be similar property. So if you have a single family ranch, it has to be compared to a single family ranch. If you have a tri-level where you walk in, stairs up, stairs down, that property has to be compared to a similar property. The only times they're able to go out a little bit different if there are no comparables in the area. Okay, if there are no comparables within the last year, within a mile, then they can search for other like properties that are slightly outside of that mile. But they typically like to stay within the same area, within the same range, because school district, busy streets, all of that stuff comes into play with a property value. So they like to do an exact comparison of like properties.
Gotcha. And so if I'm a buyer, we've gotten through the appraisal process. What happens if, I'm just going to throw a number, what happens if we're under contract for $250,000 and appraisal comes back at $235,000? What happens then?
So two options. Actually, there's more than two options. So one, buyer could say, I'm moving forward, I'll pay the difference, which is an appraisal gap waiver. Okay. Two, they go back and negotiate somewhere in the middle. Seller can reduce their purchase price. The last option would be to have another opinion of value. So what happens is we can take a close look at the existing appraisal to find out if it was done properly. Okay, meaning square footage is accurate, bedroom count is accurate, bathroom count is accurate. If there is something that is not consistent in that appraisal, and you can find what's called a material deficiency, then that appraisal can be removed from the timeline and you can order another one. So if an appraisal has square footage of 2,500 square feet and the square footage is actually 3,000, that is a material deficiency on the appraisal. And that would allow you to then order another one to see if you can get a better look at the value.
Gotcha. And so to that point, I have a follow-up question to my first question, but to that point, so who requests, so the example I just gave, we're in the contract $250, appraisal comes back at $235. Who is then responsible for requesting that reconsideration of value? Does that fall on the buyer? Is that the seller who says, hey, I know my house is worth more than that? Or is that you?
That's a buyer or seller. That's a buyer or seller. So in the event that it comes in lower, typically the seller is going to say, hey, that's not accurate. My real estate agent has provided me comparables. These are the comparables that we have. If one of those comparables are not on the appraised value, we can do a rebuttal for the appraisal to see if we could get that value increased.
Gotcha.
And then we will send those comparables over to the appraiser through a third party, which is a management company, and we will put comments in there. This property is same square footage, sold within the last 6 months. It's less than a mile away, and the value is higher. Can you please take a second look at this and see if this can increase the value of that actual appraised value that we have on there?
Gotcha. Okay, and then so my follow-up question to what happens if the appraisal comes in lower? What happens if the appraisal comes in overvalue? We're in the contract for $250. Appraiser comes out and it appraises at, let's say, $275. I guess kind of a two-pronged question.
Yep.
How often, if ever, does that happen? And then what happens if that we're in that scenario where the appraisal comes back higher than the contract price?
Sure. So appraisal is purchased by the buyer. Okay. So when appraisal comes in over value, that is typically not communicated to any party other than the buyer side. So when it comes in higher,
yay,
great job.
Right, exactly.
Awesome.
All
You're
right.
in a great equity position.
Instant equity.
And then the appraisal email, when it is requested, we typically state that the appraisal came back at or above value as is. As is meaning no repairs needed. Okay.
Gotcha. And if there are repairs needed, that's, I think the terminology is subject to,
Correct. Yep. Subject to.
and that subject to could be, it could be a number of things. It could be probably not structural, but
So yeah, I actually had my appraisal management company come up with a list. It's appraisal checklist that they typically have when they're going through. So I can go through some of these with you right now. Yeah. So for an FHA appraisal, missing handrails with a minimum of 3 steps, cracks in doors or windows, carpet torn or ripped up, noticeable infestations, gas or flammable tanks can't be within 300 feet of the home. Appraiser needs to check all attics and crawl spaces, make sure smoke alarms are installed, roof shingles missing, curling, or broken, proper ventilation, utilities must be on at time of inspection, all utilities. They check water pressure of sink after flushing toilets, structural conditions, floor supports, framing walls, ceilings, exposed wires, peeling paint, making sure it is not lead-based, homes prior to 1978. That's a big one. And any drainage problems. So if there's going to be any leaks in the leaks in the ceiling, walls, they have to be addressed.
Right. So it sounds like more kind of safety and functionality.
Absolutely,
right.
Yes. An appraisal is there, not only to dictate the actual value of the property, but to make sure that that property is habitable.
Gotcha. And so I want to jump into this is something we hear a lot about in the industry. So FHA appraisal.
Yes.
The FHA appraisal, if I understand it correctly, sticks with the property for a certain amount of time after
6
the
months.
appraisal? 6 months.
6 months, yes.
So in the scenario we just laid out, we're under contract for $250, appraisal comes back at $235, we have an FHA buyer. Any FHA buyer that, let's say the seller says, hey, nope, I don't want to move forward, buyer says, no, I don't want to pay the difference, house goes back on the market, that appraisal value at $235,000 now sticks with that property for 6 months.
For 6 months, correct. So the next buyer that goes under contract, if the financing is FHA, will have that same appraisal. Now, in the event that the existing mortgage company will not transfer that appraisal, the new lender will be able to order a new one. Okay? But majority of the time, that appraisal gets transferred, that value is stuck with that property for the 6 months of the duration. If the financing is conventional, it has to be ordered as a new appraisal.
So a conventional appraisal doesn't, quote unquote, stick with the property for any length of
Correct.
time.
Yep.
Gotcha. Okay. And so we were talking about reconsideration of value. It seems like going to an appraiser and saying, hey, I would like a reconsideration of value is saying, I don't like the way you did your job, you didn't do it correctly, or basically saying you did your job wrong. Is there a way to, I guess, ask that question professionally without
Yes.
ticking people off?
Yeah. So the good thing is there's no direct contact with appraisers. We have to use a management company. So an appraisal is an opinion of value. So everyone's opinion is going to be different. If you had 5 appraisers appraise one single property, and you said, we just want your opinion of value on this, and you're not giving them a purchase price, each one of them is going to come in with a different value. Now, they're all going to be within $5,000 to $10,000 of each other. At least they should be, but they're going to be different values. So the opinion of value is where that reconsideration of value comes in, because if it appraised for $235 and the purchase price is $250, and you have comparables that support a value of $250, you're just asking that appraiser, can you please reconsider with these additional comparables that I feel support a value of $250,000 based on the square footage, the bedroom count, and stuff like that. So, it's not that the appraiser is wrong or right, but that is their opinion. And if you're able to support a higher value, you're just giving your opinion. And 99% of the time, that appraiser is going to take that into consideration and say, hey, you know what, I am looking at this a little bit differently now. You did provide a couple extra comparables that maybe I didn't look at, and I'm going to look at this, and you know what, I do feel that maybe this increased our value, maybe all the way to the 250, or maybe we're at 245. Now that gap is significantly less, which could allow them to keep a deal together.
Gotcha. And so that kind of leads into what was going to be my next question, which let's say I own a property, I'm considering selling, I haven't put it on the market or anything, but I've got a realtor I'm working with who's run comps, but I want to get an appraisal. I want an appraiser to come out and say, hey, I need your opinion of value on this property. Is there anything as a seller that I can do in advance of the appraiser arriving to, I guess, cast the house in its best light in order to, eke out the most amount of value possible?
Sure, yeah. So I would say number one, declutter. Declutter. If you're going to sell your house, declutter. Okay. People want to visualize themselves when they walk through living there. That's what sells a home, is walking in, kitchen table, bedroom, and decluttering is going to be the first visual aspect. Making sure that your landscaping looks good and not weeds growing everywhere. If the paint is chipping, I would say it's fairly easy to get a handyman, scrape that, repaint it. Cleanliness of the property also does help as well. But I would say making sure that the property is aesthetically catching to the eye. Appealing to the eye is the first step before you list your property.
Gotcha. And then this might be a question more so directed directly at an appraiser, but what questions should a buyer or seller ask of an appraiser? So say that the appraisal is scheduled. Let's say I'm an independent seller, I'm not listed.
Sure.
Appraiser comes and says, I'm gonna come out and Wednesday, 12 o'clock. Are there any questions that maybe I should be asking the appraiser just to confirm that this appraiser is like not some guy who just got his license or got certified a couple of days ago and is now potentially going to be appraising my house?
Sure, yeah. And they're allowed to ask the appraiser what their qualifications are. Every appraiser has to be licensed, but how long they've been doing it, what areas do they typically appraise in? Those are all valid questions, because if you have someone that is typically an appraiser in the suburbs, I'm not saying that they're not able to appraise a condo in the city, because it typically does use the same platform, but they might not be familiar with specific areas that are highly desired in the city. So to ask those questions is all valid. And if they state that they've had their license for 2 months and they're not familiar with the area and the desire of where that particular property is, it can be requested that another appraiser come out with a little bit more qualification.
Gotcha. And so we've been talking primarily single family homes, and I mentioned like a 2-unit in one of the examples. What about appraisals for condos? Let's say you have a condo that sits in the building, the unit itself is nice, but the building is, looks a little worn, run down. Maybe the association doesn't take as good care of the building as they should. Does that impact or could that potentially impact the value of the condo unit itself? Let me rephrase. Does the overall condition of a condo building potentially impact the value of the condo within that structure?
Yes, it can, because if the property is not being upkept, that can. It makes it less desirable. It makes people not want to move into that property, which means that sale might sit on the market for longer time, and then it devalues it. The longer a property sits on the market, the more people tend to decrease the sale price. So yes, that can definitely devalue the overall prices in that condo building. But to appraise a condo, an appraiser always wants to use comparables in that exact building. Okay. So those comparables in that building are going to dictate the value of that condo. The longer it sits, more a seller gets anxious to sell, the lower they drop that price. So making sure that the association is keeping up with the the building, whether it be siding or brick, making sure it aesthetically is appealing to the eye, snow removal, cutting the grass, making sure all of the landscaping looks nice. All of that stuff is going to make a building desirable, make more people want to move into it, which therefore increases the actual value of that building.
Gotcha. Can we take a quick break?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, cool.
Yep.
Just need to grab some water. Oh man.
Give me 1 second.
Yeah.
I'll go check
Yep.
something out.